Hi, everybody. How we doing? Are we ready for it? Are we ready for the big day? Here it is. Christmas is almost here. We're about a week away from that big day, that day when you're going to get a whole lot of gifts and just more stuff that you're going to have in your house that you have to find space for. Maybe you'll put it on top of some other stuff that you got last year or the year before that. Maybe you'll throw it in a box and put the box in the closet and never open the box again. Maybe you'll put it up in a cupboard, and every time you open that cupboard, you'll see it, but you never use it. But there it is, just looking at you in the face. There it is. There's that little bowl that your mother in law or your grandmother in law gave you, and it's there, and it's got a weird design, and you're never going to use it. But there it is in the cupboard, looking at you all the time. But you don't want to get rid of it because your grandmother-in-law gave it to you. How could you get rid of that? She put a lot of thought into that gift, right? Sometimes you just need to let things go so you're not constantly bombarded with the stuff in your house that you don't need and you don't use and you don't want. It's just another vehicle for stress. It adds stress in your life. They are attached to emotions that you don't necessarily want to have. It's time to just let those things go. Today on the show, I'm talking to Melissa Barlow, who is the owner of a business called Your Joyful Space. She helps you declutter. She helps you go through and get rid of the things in your house and in your life that you just don't need, that serve no function, that serve no purpose. They're only there to take up space. I think everybody, myself very much included, could benefit from that help, from that service. Somebody to come in and say, do you really need that shirt that's been sitting in your closet for 3 years without you ever wearing it, but you think, hey, you know what? One of these days, my gut will be small enough where I can button the damn thing. No, it's never going to be small enough. And even if it is, I'm never going to wear that shirt because it's an ugly shirt anyways. Throw it out, Matt. Throw out the clothes that you're never going to fit into and you're never going to wear again. Recycle it. Give it away. Donate it to somebody who's in need. Geez, take it to Goodwill and get your tax write-off, for Christ's sakes. It's serving no purpose being in your house, is what I'm saying. And Melissa will come in and help you do that, but in a very nice way, I should say. She's a practicing Buddhist, so she's got this air of calm and peace around her, which is very nice. And she's also got an educational background in psychology, so she can help you work through those emotions and those feelings that are attached to some of these items as you're going through them and as you're throwing them away. And she helps you say goodbye to them in a very peaceful way. And at the end, it results in you having a space that is not just organized and decluttered, but calming. Isn't it? It's nice to have calm in your lives and in your home. And you don't have to be a hardcore minimalist, somebody that's only got one chair in a room and a bowl that they eat their cereal out of. You don't have to be that kind of a minimalist to have peace in your home. But you do need to get rid of some of this stuff that serves no purpose and has no function. And I really learned a lot talking to her, and it made me think about the things that are in my own home and how I can start going through some of these things that serve no purpose and bring me no happiness and bring me no joy and maybe even bring me stress. They bring me negative emotions, and how I can get rid of those things or pass them on or give them to somebody who could use them and need them. I think you're really going to enjoy this one. She's got an interesting background too. She came from the restaurant world. She owned a restaurant. She was a caterer. She did some event planning. So she's always been kind of like business minded. She's an entrepreneur. And this venture, I found out, is only about 6 months old. This business that she has now, the co-working space that she works out of, is called Balance RVA, which was really cool. I got to go take the show on the road and visit her there, and we recorded it there in a podcasting room. They've got video equipment. They've got a kitchen where somebody was doing a cooking class. That whole space was I walked in, it was very calming. So it was it was very appropriate for her business and what she does. But anyway, before we get into the talk with Melissa, I do want to just let everybody know, because I know you're wondering about my sleeping habits. About a year ago, I got one of those mattresses from, you order a mattress in a box and it comes to your door, and it's one of those like hybrid foam and spring mattresses. Anyways, a year ago, I ordered one of those mattresses in a box, didn't know what to expect. All I knew was that, it was probably cheaper than going to a mattress store and picking out one of those high dollar Tempur-Pedic deals, and I needed a quick solution because my quality of sleep was killing me. So we got one of those mattresses. I got to tell you, like, my sleep has never been better. I'm sleeping the whole night through. I don't have any back pain. Well, I've got my old man back pain, but I don't have any back pain related to how I'm sleeping, I should say. So that's why I wanted to put into my show notes this week an affiliate link to a company called Allswell. They make those mattresses that come to your door in a box that you unfold, and it like decompresses and one of those deals. They have the hybrid mattresses with the memory foam and with the springs, and they're like super cheap. You can get a queen for under $400, I think. So if you go to my show notes, this episode, there's going to be a link in there where you can go shop for one of these mattresses if you want to try it out. They'll hook you up with free shipping and all that good stuff. I'll get a small little percentage, a cut, a little commission. Maybe you don't even need to buy one for you. Maybe you just need something for your guest room or for your kids or something you just want to test out. You can do it. You can test it out. And if you don't like it, you can return it within a certain amount of time. But I have a feeling that you're probably going to love it. I mean, there's nothing more important than sleep, right? So check it out in my show notes. Allswell mattresses. Really cool. All right, so let's talk to Melissa. We're going to talk to her about her business called Your Joyful Space. We're also going to talk to her a little bit about Swedish death cleaning. Have you heard of Swedish death cleaning? I had never heard of it, and I got to tell you, the first time I did hear of it, I thought immediately of Norwegian death metal. Because that's what it sounded like to me. But it has nothing to do with death metal or guitars at all. But yeah, I mean, I think us Americans have a lot to learn from the Swedish when it comes to parting with the things in our lives that we don't need anymore. So we're going to talk to her about that. We're going to talk to her about growing up in Richmond. We're going to talk to her about starting a business. We're going to talk to her about closing her old business. So it's a good talk. I think you're going to like it. I think you're going to like listening to her. Here it is, my talk with Melissa. Okay, so Melissa, where are we exactly? Because I just took a little tour of this place, and I got to say, it's interesting and kind of amazing as a co-working space. It's a little different.
It is. We're at Balance RVA, which is out in Henrico. I think it's a little over 10,000 square feet. It used to be a medical office of some sort, optometrist, I think.
It definitely has that medical vibe to it.
A little bit's left. I think they've done a pretty good job of covering it up. But you can still feel it in some of the little corridors that haven't been resurfaced yet. How did you feel walking around it?
I mean, I thought it was kind of cool because it was, like I said, it does have that medical vibe to it. Like I can tell it's been an office of some sort.
Yeah.
But there's the nice little touches of, like you showed me, a quiet room that has incense burning and not incense, but like some kind of like oil or something burning. And the light is nice and low and it's got a really like chill vibe to it. And then there was a kitchen where somebody was doing a cooking class, which...
So the owner Jury says that she wants it to feel like you're working at home away from home.
Yeah.
Like it's still got the comforts and there's couches everywhere and little lounges everywhere, but there's not a mess for you to clean up. Right. It's going to distract you from your work.
I mean, the coolest thing, I think, is the fact that there's childcare here.
Yes, absolutely.
That's huge for working parents.
Yep. So I'm a single parent. I have a 2.5-year-old daughter, and I tried working from home, getting emails done and phone calls done. She does not let me talk on the phone.
Right. Yeah, I hear that.
And so it's so relieving to have a place where I can come and focus, network with other entrepreneurs. Not everybody is, but some people are entrepreneurs or remote workers, and I can drop her off, and the teachers are amazing.
So these are teachers that are like, this is their job. They're here to be like daycare teachers. And
we have 3. One of them's on maternity leave. She comes back next week, I think. So we'll have 3 full-time teachers. Pretty amazing. One of them was an elementary school teacher. One of them, she's the younger one that's just on maternity leave. She has just been a caretaker for a long time. And then the third one happens to be my sister, who just started because they needed someone to come take over while Tabitha was out on maternity leave. And she happened to be available. So she was only going to stay for a couple months, and they like her so much that they're all going to stay now, which is awesome for me because my daughter gets to spend extra time with her aunt, which is nice.
Yeah, mine's about to turn 2 at the end of this month, my youngest one.
It's hard to manage working at home with them. Some kids might be better. She wants to be involved in everything I'm doing.
Yeah.
So if I'm doing computer work, she wants to be help. Let me help you write the email, Mom.
Yeah.
Doesn't get me far.
Yeah, I'm kind of lucky because my wife's a teacher. So during the day, the kids are gone at school and the youngest goes to daycare. But in the summer, when my wife's home, it's going to be a whole different story because I don't know how I'm going to get work done.
Because you got the 2 older ones?
Yes, because
Well,
I've got the 2 older ones and the baby and the wife who are all going to be home, expecting me to do laundry or
yeah.
or like go play.
Well, maybe you can pop up here sometime.
I know. I'm thinking about it because this is really awesome, and it seems very inviting. When I walked in, it was very inviting atmosphere, which is nice
and practical too. I mean, here we are sitting in a podcast room.
Yeah,
soundproofing.
That's the other thing I was going to bring up is that like you brought me back to this room. I thought I was going to be in a conference room, and you brought me back to like an actual podcast room that has foam on the walls.
Yeah.
And there was already some equipment in here, and I'm like, oh great, this is like probably going to be the best audio quality that I've had so far.
I'm excited for that.
I'm excited for it too. I can't wait to hear how it sounds.
And then we walked past that new video room, which I hadn't seen yet, but with the video equipment. And so, I think
You had a green screen and everything and some lights. That's really interesting that you've got a space here for creative people to come and not only do creative stuff, but use some of this equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'll have to set you up with Jury because there's a lot more to the place. She has a scholarship program. I think it's still kind of getting there. It's in its baby steps. But there are some sponsors who donate, and the scholarship goes towards people that are either single parents trying to have a startup or new entrepreneurs that don't have steady income yet, or nonprofits. There's a list of like 10 different types of groups that the money is allocated to so that they can come in and get membership help or childcare help financially so that they can get started, which is incredible.
And her name is Jury.
Jury Miller.
What was her deal before all this?
I think she was in commercial banking. She got out of that. She has a couple kids of her own. And I don't know. She just said, I'll let her tell you her story. She
so
has
how
a
did
great
you find
story.
this place?
I found out about it before she was involved, actually. I was just starting up my new company and was looking for an option. I didn't know if it existed, but a place to work and have childcare that was affordable. Affordable being the key word there because childcare is as expensive as a mortgage these days.
Yeah, tell me about it.
I just happened to come across a news article. I think it was called Balance Space was the previous business. They did a good job getting it started, but they maybe didn't have the capital or the vision to kind of pull it off, and it was kind of falling apart, and they had a little bit of a blow up. And so as the business was about to dissolve, Jury found out about it and just came in and said, I think that I can make it work. That business dissolved. She bought all the building and all the assets and started up Balance RVA.
Yeah.
And within about 3 weeks, she had transformed the building and the child care program. It was just more like a daycare before. There's an entire program back there for the kids now, which is it's a relief, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
Because when you're a working parent, sometimes you feel guilty that you're not getting the time to do all these crafts and things with your kids, right? And so in daycare, I kind of felt like, well, she's getting socialization. Now, every day she's coming home and like, look at what I made and look at what I'm...
And how nice is it to say, I'm going to go have lunch with my kid today?
It's
and
so
walk right down the hall and do it.
And we do.
Yeah.
And sometimes, she's having a cranky day. They're like, let's go for a walk. And they'll bring her to me. They'll just come by and say, why don't you hang out with Mom for a few minutes? Sets her straight. And then she's like, all right, Mom, I'm going back to school.
I mean, I think places like this, not just this place, but like places like this, co-working spaces in general, have really blown up over the past 5-10 years or so.
Yeah.
It's so great for young entrepreneurs or people who are maybe changing careers or people who are starting out to have access to a place like this where they can come and get work done and feel like they're working in a quote unquote traditional office environment and really like they're given all of the tools to get their business off the ground and to really run it the way that they want to run it. I think it's pretty awesome. So you mentioned that you're here because you have your own business.
That I do.
And I do want to hear about that business. But before we even get to it, I want to hear why you even decided to start this business in the first place. So let's just go back. Let's talk about where you're from. Are you from Richmond originally?
I am. I grew up in Chesterfield.
Oh, you did?
That's all Richmond. When you're in Richmond, it's all Richmond.
Right.
It's confusing because you're like, wait, it's Henrico, it's Chesterfield, it's even Goochland at this point. It goes out so far.
Right. I mean, Richmond is growing.
Yeah.
I mean, Goochland and Amelia are like the next big things.
Yeah.
Powhatan's already a big thing.
It is. And all of it was nothing but land or cows or whatever when we were growing up. So it's interesting to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, Richmond's grown on me as it's grown. I didn't love it when I was a teenager and when I was in my 20s.
What high school did you go to?
I went to Meadowbrook.
Okay.
Down in Chesterfield. I went to VCU when I went to college.
Uh-huh.
But Richmond had a lot of growing to do. It's still the capital of the Confederacy.
Yep.
It still had some stuck points, if you will.
Yeah, right.
Right?
It did then, and it does now too.
Yeah. It's growing.
It's
though.
growing, and things are happening. Things are changing.
You heard about the statue that's gone up at the VMFA in the last few days,
so
right?
awesome.
Yeah.
Rumors of War.
Yeah.
Kahindi Wiley.
Yeah,
It's great.
It's amazing. I haven't been down there to see. I hear it's so much larger than I anticipated it to be. I knew it was coming. I'd seen the articles about it, and I saw the platform go down a couple weeks ago. I happened to be up there visiting a friend, and I said, that's got to be the spot.
Yeah.
So I can't wait to go down there and see it.
What's crazy about it, it's such an important piece of art, first of all, but what's crazy about it is that it's on the land that VMFA owns, but it's actually like adjacent to or maybe even part of the land that was Robert E. Lee's camp or something like that.
Yeah, that's where the historical museum is, I think.
That's where like the Church of the Confederacy is
exactly.
on the same land.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird juxtaposition, and it's like less than a mile away from Monument Avenue, which of course has all of those Confederate generals and soldiers up on gigantic monuments. So for anybody who's listening who doesn't know what we're talking about, you got to go look up Rumors of War at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts and see what we're talking about. It's really amazing. It just went in the other day after being in New York for a little stint.
Yeah, it's in Times Square, I think.
Times Square, but now it's at its permanent home. So I'm going to go check it out as soon as I can.
I'm excited for it.
So yeah.
Where were we? I was talking about the things that I didn't love so much about Richmond when I was coming up. I'm pretty progressive, and I traveled a lot. I think it was great for me.
Were your parents also like?
None of those things.
they were not as progressive as you are?
No, none of my family is progressive. Maybe a little bit more so
like?
Because of my influence now.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Did you have a lot of struggle growing up? Like teenage years and like
probably before that. I'm Buddhist. I would say I was born that way, which was interesting for my parents to handle because my mom and her family were all Southern Baptist, and so having me running around with my very hippie ways was probably a bit confusing for them. But I just was always that way.
But that's just the way you were.
Yes. Yeah. And so, I'm sure there was some struggle, maybe more so for my mother because she just didn't know what to do with me.
Yeah.
But, How
are you guys now?
Yeah, we're fine.
No, everything's good now?
Yeah. She's still not progressive as I am. But like I said, I don't mind being that person. I'm the oldest of all my siblings. I'm the one that pushes the boundaries and kind of opens the door for everybody else. That's my place, and that's okay for me. And I'm kind of like that in life, too. I'll definitely say the difficult things when they need to be said. My younger sister's the one who sits in the background and doesn't say it and lets me say it because it's easier, right? And that's okay. That's her place. So, there was struggle, but I don't mind it so much now that I'm older. But I traveled a lot, and it helped me because when you're growing up in a little county in a southern state, you only see one way of being, one way of life.
Yeah.
And I think as soon as I was 18 or 19, I started traveling in Europe, and you just see that the world is so much different. Everybody doesn't think that way. And so it just opened me up and let me realize that was only one little pocket of culture.
Right.
And so I was able to bring some of that back with
So you already had those thoughts anyways growing up, and then just going out and traveling validated all of that for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my family really wasn't the type to travel. I don't think my mom had been anywhere other than Georgia until I took her on a cruise sometime in maybe 2003 or something. Like she had just never been anywhere. Yeah, you just don't expect coming from that small family, that small town, to be able to venture out, but it was invaluable to me.
Yeah.
I think.
So when you got back, you were going to VCU.
I went to VCU.
What did you study there?
My degree is in psychology. I have a minor in chemistry. Maybe it doesn't make a lot of sense, but I'm a science brain, and I always really liked helping people. There's a little bit more to it. I thought I was going into the medical field, and those were the things I was kind of going to use to go into medical school, but I changed my mind after doing a little externship at MCV with some oral surgeons. So
you were going to go into
oral
dentistry?
surgery.
Oral surgery.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I loved it. And I helped and, stood in on 8-hour surgeries, and it was amazing. And I thought, this is great for me. But on my exit interview, one of the surgeons was really candid and actually got a bit choked up and emotional and told me that I had to know going into it that I would have to choose my occupation or my family, and that pretty much all the surgeons there weren't connected with their families because it required 100 hours a week of time. And it did. I mean, I could see even with the residents that were there, how much time it took. So I really had to make that decision. Did I want to go another 8 years in school and know that that was going to be a struggle, because I knew that I always wanted a family? And so I decided to change course.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm grateful for it. I always wonder sometimes, because I think I would have been good at it. However, this is the life I have now, and I'm not complaining about that either.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's no way of being an oral surgeon and not being on call 24/7.
Yeah.
And
Well, the people that I encountered when I was there, they needed so much help.
Yeah.
They all poured their everything into it, their time, their heart, their soul, putting together the surgery. You don't just walk in and do it. There's all kinds of like modeling and graphing, and you got to do all this math to figure out exactly to the millimeter, like how things are going to be orchestrated.
So did you regret it all, spending all of that time going through that and then changing courses so abruptly?
Yeah,
once
sure.
you've gotten through it?
Over the years, there are a couple times where I wonder if I should have just stuck it out. But I've had a great life, so it's one of those things, like, who knows where it would have landed if I'd have gone that course. I'm grateful that he told me that.
Yeah.
Because I think what maybe would have been more difficult is going through all that for that much time and then realizing I either wasn't going to be able to balance a family or was going to have to walk away from a career I had spent that much time building.
Oh, yeah. I think that's insanely valuable, and a lot of people, most people, don't get that from others who have the experience to say, hey, let me give you some perspective on this is what it's going to be like for you in 20 years.
It's true. Yeah, I appreciate it for that.
So you changed course. What did you change to?
I did. While I was in college, actually before I started college, I worked in restaurants. It was good money. It was easy hours to work around school. If I ever wanted to take a week or two off to go to another country, it was easy enough to do that.
What were you doing, serving or in the kitchen? Or
I started off as an expediter, kind of halfway in the middle between the front and the back of the house.
Yeah.
When I was 17, which was a kick in the pants, but it was really good for me.
Yeah.
And I was leading a kitchen line of like 4 40-year-old men. Who did not like the fact that a 17-year-old was barking orders at them.
Sure.
And they made that clear. I think I probably cried a time or two, but it really helped me establish my backbone. I
bet.
It did. Yeah. And so from there, I served. I bartended for many years. Again, it was good hours, not good hours. Mind you, I was working really late, 3 o'clock in the morning, but flexible.
Were you working in the city, in Richmond?
Yeah, mostly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I worked there used to be Mulligans was a little franchise around here.
Yeah.
And
let me tell you about Mulligans. Mulligans and the Fan was our headquarters for the Buffalo Bills.
Oh, yeah.
Backers organization. That was where, when I first moved here, that's where we went for about 10, 15 years or so until they closed.
Yeah. I used to be really close with all, I can't remember now the guy's name. John. Yep.
Yeah.
And Matt Hurley and Mark Hurley.
Mark Hurley is now the home of the Bills backers.
Yeah. And so they had one out in the West End that was more of a concert hall. It was a huge place, and they had some pretty big names for Richmond at the time. So, I worked there, and I loved it when I was doing it. I mean, it was all lively, right? It was lots of fun. I was young.
Sure. So as a young person working in the restaurant industry, was anything like saying, okay, I need to take this restaurant experience further? Or is this like a placeholder until I figure out what comes after the oral surgery?
It was always a placeholder. It was always just a means to an end. The only thing that I ever said repeatedly was, I will never open up a restaurant. Because people often said, oh, you're so good at this, you should, whatever. And I said, I will never open up a restaurant. Because I had seen how difficult it can be. It really is not the most glamorous type of business.
Right.
The profit margin is not high. It takes a lot of work. Employees can be really flaky in those flexible positions.
Right.
So lo and behold, I ended up opening a restaurant. I did a little bit more between the bar scene. I worked at like a fine dining place in Henrico for a while, and then I went back into the Fan and started working at some fan places, which I like because they have a lot of heart, smaller places.
Sure. But how did you go from working in a restaurant to
owning a restaurant? The transition was that I was also doing catering. I was doing catering for someone else, and I ended up becoming her GM because I was just so good at handling the events. And so I was doing event planning, just running the show on weddings every weekend and events every, 3 times a week. That kind of transitioned it because it put me into a little bit more of a managerial place. I think I was management at a couple of the bars, but it's all the same stuff, Maybe
were you
just
like
put in
hopping from place to place, or were you like running all of these simultaneously?
I usually had 2 or 3 jobs at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah, I like to have multiple streams of income. And I think nowadays that's kind of how things are pushing because stability is different. It's changing, right? You used to be able to have like your one career job and retire out of it and you were done.
Right.
And we just don't have that stability anymore. So I typically had, 2, if not 3 jobs running at the same time. But I learned so much with the catering stuff.
What year are we talking about here? Are we in like 04, 05, or are we later than that?
I think I started the catering stuff in 06.
Okay.
I ran that for a long while. And then I was thinking about changing companies and working with a larger catering company. And then I had an opportunity to open up my own catering company and restaurant. And I did, even though I said I never would. So I did that.
So you opened up a catering company and restaurant?
At the same time.
So was it the same place or was it two separate things?
It was the same building, but they were structured as 2 separate businesses, basically.
Okay.
So, but, still one owner, lots of hours. So I went from not doing the oral surgery because it would be 100 hours a week to doing the restaurant and catering company, which ended up being 100 hours a week. It's so ironic.
Not as financially rewarding.
No, not at all. But I loved it. I love feeding people. And I loved doing their weddings and their events and making their spaces just fresh and joyful and happy and giving them these memories. And for me, food is love. So every time we put together an amazing spread of food, I felt like it really helped their event go off well. And their feedback said as much.
So you were doing not just the food, you were doing event planning. You were doing
And not for all of them. Some of them had their own wedding planner. Me and my staff would go into these empty spaces. Sometimes, I did a lot of stuff at the train station down in Main Street Station. Love that space, but it doesn't even have a kitchen.
Yeah, so what did you do?
We would make one. We'd just go in and had portable ovens and, propane stove tops and things like that.
How big of a staff did you have? And how did you find them? Did you just poach them from different jobs that you had around town?
So, yeah, not poach necessarily, but they're not exclusive when they're working those because it's all depending on when the events are happening and when things are busy. So I definitely had always kept in touch and networked with people I had worked with. A lot of them just wanted to come and work with me because they had worked with me at the other company for years. Some of the people that I hired through the restaurant wanted to also kind of moonlight and do that on the weekends. And so I think the most I ever had was maybe about 27, 28 staff.
Wow.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It was a lot.
So how many years did you do that?
It was open for just under 3 years, which is successful in restaurant terms, right? I think something crazy like 80% of restaurants close in the first year.
And you were in the city?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, across from...
what was it? Can you tell me what the restaurant was?
Yeah, it was called the Empress.
Oh, I remember that.
Well, great.
What is that now?
It is called the Savory Grain. Yeah. Yes. I did that for a while. I loved it, but I was tired. I will be honest about that. Yeah. You don't work 90 or 100 hours a week consistently for, 2.5 years or so and keep up with yourself. I think what it came down to is that I had a 5-year-old niece who was having a birthday, and I think I'd only seen her once or twice. And I told you before, family really matters to me. And while I had that business, I hadn't had a chance to do that. She had lived away the first couple of years, which is why I hadn't seen her. But then I was just working so much. I never made it to a birthday party or to Thanksgiving or Christmas because I just was always dedicated to everybody else's events and things. So that was kind of wearing on me.
Yeah.
I had an opportunity to sell the business, and I thought, now's the time. I think I was 30 when I opened it. So I was 33, and I thought I'll probably be wanting to start a family at some point. Keeping the restaurant wasn't going to fit into that storyline for me.
So when you got out and sold it, did you have a plan for what was next, or were you just
absolutely not.
Yeah, you were just...
I struggled.
Did you get some good money for it at least?
I got some.
So you weren't saying, I need to find a job right now.
No, I was able to relax for a little bit and recoup.
But you didn't think, I'm going to stay in the industry?
Oh, no.
You were done with the industry. Because I have to imagine having that place, which got a lot of great press, if I remember right.
It did.
You probably knew a lot of Richmond food
Yeah.
people that could get you your next gig or get you in on another place.
Maybe, but
Yeah.
no, I just didn't want to. I think the way that I've always looked at life, I don't subscribe to the idea that you have to be or do one thing in your life. So I did that and I felt like I did it well and I was okay with it being over and me doing something new well. But it took me a long time to figure out what that was going to be. A long time.
Yeah.
So when I left there, when I sold it, when I wrapped everything up, which takes a couple months, takes a little while to kind of go through that whole process, I just literally slept for like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And then I was like, all right, what am I going to do now? I had a friend who was and is the general manager of Blanchard's Coffee here in town, which if you don't know about Blanchard's, they're amazing.
RV Ableton's my favorite.
There you go. They were still developing into what they are now, but and so he asked me to come and help for a couple months, and that turned into 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so I kind of helped them, venture out into some grocery stores and do some work with them, like
Were you doing
it.
like the sales of?
It was kind of a combination, because it was a small group. I think at that time there were only like maybe 6 or 7 employees there. So it kind of blended. It grew as I was there. In the beginning, I was just helping in their warehouse, kind of getting things like efficient or whatever. And then I ended up doing distribution and sales for them, like going out to Kroger's and helping set up their great new displays in Charlottesville or wherever. It really was just a time holder. I was just kind of doing something because I didn't know what else I wanted to do. And it was fine because I didn't have to work a whole lot. I was only working like 20 hours a week. I really needed that time. And it was helping some people that I really liked. I really love their brand.
Yeah.
You're right. So I felt like my heart was in it. I wanted to be able to give that time and help them while I could, while I was free to do it. Still, this whole time trying to figure out, like, what am I going to do for myself? And I couldn't figure it out. I needed a break, so I moved to Northern Virginia for a little bit. And
that's a place to take a break.
I know. I ended up, just working as a catering manager for Hilton Hotels, which was easy, right? It was in line with what I'd done for so long, but I didn't have to have all the responsibility and things like that.
Hilton up in Northern Virginia, you got to see a lot of traffic in there.
Yeah, it was a good job. Good pay. I just needed a break from everything, and it was a good break. While I was up there, I met my daughter's father, and we decided to start a family and ended up moving back to Richmond because I had always wanted to be back here, like around my family, let her have time with her cousins and grandma and everything. And so in that whole time, I'm trying to figure out, like, what do I want to do? Because I've always loved working for myself. I am an entrepreneur. Sad to say, I don't work well for others. I'm pretty headstrong.
Sure.
And I often will come in and maybe I'm not right, but think that I can offer some advice on how things can go better. And that's not always taken well by ownership, right?
I've been there.
Yeah. And so this whole time, I just wanted to find something that really spoke to my heart. There were things that I loved about the restaurant. I love feeding people. I love helping people. We had some cancer patients at the restaurant. This is like probably one of the things I held on to the most. They couldn't eat anywhere else because their diet was so restrictive. Like no oils, the list of no's was high. And I already had, the restaurant was allergen friendly because I'm celiac. So it was a gluten-free restaurant. We did, vegan stuff. I had people that came in with like garlic allergies, whatever it was, we could accommodate it. These cancer patients could come and eat like a really awesome home-cooked meal. And one of them actually made sure that I got a message after his passing because it meant so much to them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like that one really has always stuck with me. So I love helping and being there to help people. I just needed something that I could still be a parent, not work that many hours, but still be dedicated to. And that's a really hard thing. You have that little Venn diagram. Things you do well, things you enjoy, things you can make money with. And it's almost impossible to put them all together.
Yeah.
But I finally figured it out. And so that's what I'm doing now.
So did you figure that out before or after you moved back here?
It was after I had my daughter, during some of that newborn time, just cuddling and sitting and thinking about my heart space. Where was my heart? Where did I want to help people? And I kind of thought back on all the things I've done over the years of my personal life that felt fulfilling. And one of the things that I used to do was help people organize their space. So I did this in the catering world, right? I took an empty space, I brought stuff in, I made it joyous, I cleaned it up, we left, it was great. But I used to do that in people's homes too, just as a friend.
A friend, like
Yeah.
come over and help
Yeah,
get
just
rid of
like,
this crap?
yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
come in and say, you can't do this on your own. Let's do it together and help them declutter and organize things. And I liked it. But back in the day, I never thought about it as a business opportunity. Then I start thinking about how big of a need that is. And sometimes I think there's even more of a need.
Sure.
That's what I do.
So that's what you do.
Yeah.
So you help people organize and declutter.
I help people process the emotions of their belongings so that as we declutter and organize, we figure out the habits or the stuck points that got them to the place that they are now so that they don't get back there.
So this is much deeper than throwing out your
It is.
high school love notes.
But actually it is. It does go back to my education, maybe for the first time. Although as a bartender, I gave lots of therapy to people, right? Sitting
I'm sure
at
you
the bar.
did, yeah.
But it is. We dig deep. And not everybody needs all of that. So not every session and not every visit has that much discovery. But I definitely do talk about how did we get here? What got you to this place? And sometimes it's as simple as habit. I'm busy. I work too much. I can't do all this on my own. I help get it to a reasonable space and give them some habits that'll help them accomplish the order. Some other people, I have had a client, her friend hired me to come in. Her friend only shared to me that she thought her friend had been in, some depression for a while. And so she just couldn't get the house to a space that was really livable for her. And after going in and helping her, we uncovered that she was really in grief because she had lost her brother like 8 months beforehand and she herself had a lot of medical problems. And so all of those things really made sense as to why she couldn't keep her house straight. And she just needed to be able to forgive herself for it. And so we talked through that about how it was completely acceptable that her house fell apart because she had that grief. She had her loved ones' things with her. And that was a lot more stuff in her house, right?
Right.
That clutter, even though it felt emotional to her, was still taking up space. And she was grieving. And so she just couldn't process it all. So through that entire experience, not only were we able to get the house organized and straight and livable, but we were able to process some of those emotions so that she could move past some of it, let go of some of the things that she didn't need of her brothers, give it to somebody else that might need it. She didn't have to hold on to the guilt. We do that a lot, right? When people pass, we have a lot of guilt. Like we need to hold on to these things because it is a memory of them or they liked it and they had it once. That's a lot of burden though.
Sure. How difficult is it to get her to that point? I would imagine you can't just walk in and say, well, obviously it's because you're holding on to grief because of your brother. I would imagine there's defensiveness also to the fact that you are even in her house in the first place. And
I haven't really experienced that to this point.
Okay.
But I will say that I usually have a consultation with people before I come in.
Mm-hmm.
And we talk about what they're going through just a little bit. I just want to see what's gotten them to that point. So I don't dig a lot in the consultation, but I usually get a little bit of an idea what's going on, if they're just inheriting a lot of stuff, if it's just life stress. But people want help. They want someone to help them. If they've gotten to the point that they're thinking about asking a professional organizer to come in and help them, they already know that they're a little bit desperate or something's gotten a little bit more overwhelming that they can handle. And certainly I don't walk in and say, let's dig into, your deepest emotions. But as we're going through this stuff, there are emotions right there. There are emotions attached to our clothes.
Sure.
This is a place that I start in most homes. I also do businesses, so that's a little bit different. We don't start off with clothes, clearly. But when we start off with clothing, I'm asking the client to touch these things and evaluate if it is useful to them, if it brings them joy, if it brings them something else, and maybe we need to let it go. So that can be as simple as it has a texture that you don't care for, and every time you go into your closet, you touch it, you don't want to wear it, and you put it back, then it needs to go. It's not giving you any kind of functionality.
Right.
It can also be something quite emotional, like a sweatshirt of an ex.
Sure.
And that we think we're keeping this because, again, it's a memory. But really, every time you see it, you subconsciously are going to be reminded of the failure of a relationship, right? Or the maybe the negative emotions that came when that ended.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of letting those things go because throughout your entire home, you might accumulate 500,000 items. Some homes have 1 million items in them, which is astounding.
Right.
Not everyone. I mean, every piece of silverware might not hold an emotion, right? Sometimes they do because it might be passed down.
Right.
But these things hold emotion for us. And when we walk through our house, we pick them up. We may not be aware of it, but if you walk in your front door and let's say there's a stack of bills, that's stress.
Oh, yeah.
Immediately
Sure.
when you walk in, you see the bills.
So can I just throw those out?
You know? Well, I mean, we don't really need to keep them like we used to.
Oh, right.
You know, like
no,
when
I'm one of those people
yeah.
who had boxes
Mm-hmm.
of old bills because I was taught that somebody was going to get my account number. And
Exactly. And we filed them, and
right.
you know, you got Virginia Power, you got everything.
Yeah.
We don't need anymore. And it's good. A lot of people do paperless stuff, and they don't have all that
Yeah.
paperwork piled up at the front door. But you can pay them and let them go. Recycle them. It's fine. But you see what I'm getting at. All
Yes.
these little things affect our mood. My aim is that you walk in your house and it feels like the relaxing reprieve of your day. And most people don't get that.
No.
They walk in and they see the clutter or they see
Yes.
the dishes.
Yes.
If the dishes are there, but the rest of the house is organized, that's not stressful. That's just a chore, right? That's just a 15-minute job that you can attend to later. But when, you know, there's piles of things everywhere or the laundry can't get put away because there's no room for it, we just walk in and feel overwhelmed, and we either become stressed or we dissociate, which is why instead of cleaning, we will turn on Netflix and binge watch a show.
Hello.
Because
That's
it's easier, right? It feels better.
right.
Now what I do is I walk in and I evaluate, how did we get here? What are your needs? What are the things that make you happy? And what can we do to get from here to there in a relatively quickly format?
How long of a process is it normally for most people?
I like to do it over the course of a month. It's about a session a week. And that is so it's not so overwhelming for people. I don't want to do it all in 1 week. That's a lot. That's a lot of stuff to touch.
Yeah.
That's a lot of stuff to put away. You're going to be exhausted. It's a lot of emotions, right? Letting go of stuff. You talked about love letters earlier. Letting go of things like that can be really emotional for people. So I like to space it out. I come in for a session for about 4 hours, and then they have all week. Sometimes there's homework they have to do, finishing up things that we've started. If we started a closet, they've got to kind of finish through the process. And then coming back in a week and picking up either where we left off or a new area that really needs attention. And I only work in tandem with people. So there are a lot of companies I'm sure you can hire, and they'll just come in and organize your space or clean your space while you're not there.
Yeah.
And that's great for some people. Maybe that's all they need.
Yeah.
Or there are organizational people that'll just come in and like give you a brand new closet.
Right. But if you're still holding on to those issues,
Yes.
then your brand new closet's going to get cluttered.
This is my point.
Yes.
Right?
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's all going to get back to that same point. It's not always easiest work for people. I get a little bit more pushback in the beginning from some of the husbands, because a lot of times women are the ones that are bringing me in. And so the husbands don't always understand that we're going to get to their stuff too. Right. But once they start seeing the space clear out and the clutter gone, they also start to typically feel better about the process and more involved in the process. And then they want to do it because they can see the benefits, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love what I do now.
That's awesome.
And I wish it hadn't taken me so many years to figure out what the next venture was going to be. But this is the one. This one makes me feel good about my time with people.
So I want to talk to you a little bit about the words that got me to get in contact with you in the first place. Swedish death cleaning.
Oh yeah, it sounds so morbid.
No, it sounds like death metal.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I have heard this too.
No, I mean that's the first thing I thought of when I read that. I had no idea what it is. I still really don't. I did a quick lookup of what it was, but then I was like, you know what? I just want her to tell me what it is, because it sounds kind of interesting. And the bits that I did read, I thought I know a few people in my life who could probably benefit from this.
I think so many people
can you explain
could
this
benefit.
to me?
Sure. One of the avenues that I like to focus on in my business is working with seniors who need to downsize, who need to either move into assisted living places or move in with family. And so a lot of times they need to let go of a lot of stuff in order to make that transition.
Right.
So Swedish death cleaning is a process. We don't really have an English comfortable translation for it, or we don't even have something in our culture like it. But it is a method of intentionally filtering through your things in your retirement years so that you don't burden your family with your stuff.
After you die.
Yeah. So you do it beforehand. It's very intentional. It's all about caring and lightening the load. So just as you would write out your will or prepay for a burial plot, all these things that people do because they want to make things easier on their family when they pass, this is a process of lightening the load for them, because when your family's grieving, going through a house full of stuff is agonizing, and a lot of people can't deal with it. So Swedish death cleaning is an entire process of periodically, systematically going through all of your belongings and gifting them while you're still living. I like to call it living inheritance because we typically think that our grandchildren, our children are going to want all of our stuff when we die. Sometimes they do. If there's a favorite ring or a favorite figurine or something, yeah, they might really be attached to that. But typically, they don't want it all. They have their own stuff that they love in their house, and they don't have room for a second set of bedroom furniture.
That doesn't match their style.
Exactly, yeah. And so these things matter to us, and so we just think that they're going to matter to the next generation, but it's just not always the case. So in Swedish death cleaning, we get you to identify the things that you really thought you wanted to pass on to people and ask them if they want it now. So if you have a favorite set of china that in your 70s you're not really using anymore and you always thought your granddaughter might want it, ask her if she wants to use it now. Ask her if she wants to host Christmas dinners with the family china while you're still around to enjoy it with her. Or give them your favorite ring that you planned on passing down so you can actually see them use it and appreciate them wearing it all the time.
Right. And another thing that probably does is eliminates the fighting that would happen afterwards over who gets what.
Yeah. People don't think about that so much. I mean, I think I've seen that in some of my family and friends. It happens so often. You know, there's so many mixed emotions going on. People may not typically want to fight over stuff, but when you're grieving, right, you're going to go through all these emotions. Anger is one of the stages of grief.
Sure.
Right? Yeah, people fight over stuff that they probably don't even want.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I think I had a grandparent pass and I didn't care about any of the stuff. Clearly, I don't want a house full of things that didn't really matter. But the rest of the family did, and they cleaned her out, and they left me her bowling ball. Right? And you know what the funny thing is? I have that bowling ball, and I use that bowling ball, and that's fine with me. But the discussion with the family as they were kind of tearing each other apart to take those things, you know, it really shouldn't be that way.
Because
it doesn't have to be that way.
They're going to have to give them up when they die anyways. Too,
exactly.
So is this a practice in Sweden? Is this just a thing that people do all
Not
the time?
everybody, but yes. Yeah, okay. It's definitely a practice. It's about looking after your family. And if you think about it that way, it's not just about like preparing for your death, which is how it comes across. I think the translation is death cleaning, and that makes it seem like a personal thing. Sure, and it helps you, right? Having your space organized as an older person keeps it more healthy. You don't have dust and stuff. It makes it easier if you have to transition into a smaller space or move into family. But really the aim is to intentionally take care of your family before you're gone. And an easy way to do that is to not leave them with so many things to sort through.
To sort through and either sell or give to somebody else or donate without having them know what your intentions were in the first place.
That's exactly it. You might have stacks of newspapers that, who knows, for whatever reason it mattered at a point in your life. I've seen this in homes, but they don't matter anymore. And your family certainly isn't going to want them. So I would go through the process of encouraging you to recycle them now because your family doesn't need to feel like that mattered to you. And then what do you do with these things? I mean, there's a lot of examples of things like that might have mattered in your life, but it just doesn't translate when you pass them on. They even have a practice of having like a throwaway box. And that might be memories or letters or journals that really matter to you in your older age, but they won't matter to somebody else. And so they will label it like throw away. After my death, throw away. And so it's stuff that really matters to them, but it gives your family permission to put those things in the trash because we don't feel like we can do that.
And there's no guessing on whether or not they would have wanted you to.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, have you seen this practice lift some sort of burden or lift like something off of that older person who's going through it?
Yeah. I really think that sharing the items while you're still alive brings them so much joy. And we don't think about it that way, right? I think that internally we think it's fulfilling to know you're leaving something to your family when you go. But being able to, like I said, in the example of giving china to someone, if you give it to them and they love it so much that when you come to dinner, everybody uses it, you get to share that joy with them every time. So in that sense, yes, I think that the process, it kind of lightens the idea of them passing as well.
Yeah.
On the other side of that, I see it lightening for the family. So I get a lot of people that have inherited housefuls, and not always just one, sometimes two housefuls of stuff in like a 5-year period where they've lost a family member here or their significant others lost a family member on the other side. And the burden for those people is so high. So it really helps them. I have some children of older people that are interested now, like trying to encourage the parents to do it because they know that that burden's going to come onto them in 5 or 10 years or however long. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting process. I'm still trying to figure out a better, maybe American version of it. I just haven't come up with anything yet.
I think you should stick with it.
Yeah.
I like it.
I like it too.
It is kind of difficult to boil down into a 1 or 2 word
death
concept.
Cleaning we don't talk about death the same way as some cultures do here.
Right.
We talked about me being Buddhist. I deal with death in a little bit of a different way. It's more of it's just a process of life. And so I've always just been a little bit more accepting of it.
Right.
But typically...
Which is also probably why you don't hold such attachment to material things.
It's true. Being Buddhist, I mean, I don't have it all perfect, right? I still have little areas of my house that have little stacks of things that are meaningful to me. But typically... chaos in your space causes chaos in your mind. That could be translated as stress. You have a lot of chaos in your home. It can cause a lot of stress internally. And there's some research to back that up too, that it can be associated with depression and anxiety and those kind of things. And so limiting that chaos is really important. Buddhism typically has always had a tie-in with minimalism, only having the things that really give you function or really bring you joy and letting go of the other things.
Do you think that's just the American culture?
I would say it's probably spread. It's not just American culture now, but yes, definitely. We have been overwhelmed by consumerism.
Sure.
And, some of it's not necessarily our fault. Marketing is a really powerful tool.
Oh, yeah.
And, nowadays we started off really young. I'm not a fan of child marketing towards children, but you throw Disney in there and you can just see it everywhere. Like what kid, even if a kid hasn't watched the movies, what kid doesn't know who Elsa is? Or,
right.
It starts really young and people just feel like they have to consume these things. So they consume, they fill their spaces with stuff, but rarely do they go through the process of filtering through them and letting things go. That's a hard one, but that's what I do every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I see that just with my own children and with myself. I mean, there's stuff that we have in our house and there's toys that my kids have that they, for some reason, feel some sort of attachment to.
Right.
That if you threaten to throw it out or if you say we're going to donate this to somebody else who needs it, they get very anxious and very angry and very sad.
Right. And I think that that's our culture. I really do. Yeah. I don't think that is a overall natural inclination because some other cultures don't experience giving like that. With my daughter, when she was 18 months old, her guide mother, because I'm Buddhist, it's not her godmother. Anyway, her guide mother, she's brilliant. She sent her a gift, and it was a book called The Giving Bag. The Giving Bag, I think is what it is. Okay. It was like a mom that created this, and I think it's a great business for her. But it's a little box that comes with this book and a red satchel. Kind of looks like a Santa bag in a way. And it tells a story to the kids in a really great way about how there are other people in the world that are less fortunate. It even shows like a kid that has holes in their shoes, things like that. And it's not really a sad book, but it's a little bit realistic. Sure. That there are just really other people that could benefit from things that we don't use as much or that we don't play with as much. And it's really important for us to filter through our things and give away when we can. And at 18 months old, after reading that story to my daughter, she filled the bag up. She did it for 3 days. And she really did pick out things that she didn't play with anymore. Like she got it, even at that age. So I think that we just don't typically put that into practice and show our kids what it feels like to let go of things early. So then it does create anxiety later, which we experience as adults. Sure. We experience, anxiety over letting things go. But I think that we could do better. We could give them these kinds of books that say, hey, Christmas is coming. You're going to have all these new things. Why don't we do something good and clean out our space and pass these along to somebody else? And give the kids the opportunity. Maybe not like, hey, we're going to give this away, right? Because then the control's out of their hands and that's very emotional. But when I set this thing out and I explained it to her, she did it on her own. Yeah. And I think that, like I said, it's just a culture thing. We are learning consumerism and we're not teaching how to let go. or how to donate. Really, for me, it's about appreciating that something had a meaning in your life and then letting it go when it no longer does, right? Like you might have had a favorite coat that you wore to everything, but it doesn't really fit you the way that it did in your 20s, right?
You're talking to a guy who's got pants in his closet that haven't fit me in years.
Yeah. So it's okay to look at that and say, you fit me well and looked good on me for this amount of time. Thank you. And let it go. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean, you're saying thank you to this inanimate object. I think maybe Marie Kondo does that, and that's a little bit more in a Japanese culture.
It's just more, I would say, acknowledging that point of your life happened.
Yes, exactly.
It was great, and it's gone.
It's about letting yourself go through that process and making it okay to let it go.
Yeah.
So appreciate it. Say, you did me good. And now I'll let you go.
Man.
But then actually do it. I think it's a good practice to keep some sort of like a recyclable grocery bag and leave that in my daughter's room so that when she has clothes that don't fit her, they go straight in there. It's a practice. She's used to seeing it. It doesn't fit anymore. Let's pass it on. She's growing out of shoes, which happens like every 3 weeks, mm-hmm. right? They go in the bag. Yeah. And so she's gotten used to that practice. And she'll even say, I don't like it anymore, Mom. Let's give it to somebody else. A lot of adults could stand to practice that too because do you remember George Carlin?
Of course.
The comedian.
Yes.
He had a skit, always made me laugh when I was younger, but it's so relevant. It was a skit about stuff and how we buy stuff, we fill our homes with it, and we outgrow our homes. We get a bigger home, but then we buy more stuff to fill it, and then we buy a shed to put more stuff in, and then we end up having a storage unit to put more stuff in. It just goes on and on and on. But that's really practically what's happening to people. They feel like they've outgrown their homes. Mm-hmm. For me, it also comes down to a financial burden on people. All the stuff that we have ends up costing us a lot of money.
Sure.
And that comes into play in our economy, right? We can't all upgrade a house. A lot of times we need to be maybe downsizing, right? To afford things a bit more. And when you have that much stuff, the thought of downsizing seems impossible. You think you need another garage.
Right. You think you need another floor to your house.
Exactly. And people do this. Yeah. And then, they extend themselves financially when they really can't because of all this stuff. And really, most of that stuff hasn't seen the light of day, right? It's in a box. It's in a space that nobody's looked at in years.
That's what I was going to ask you is it okay if it's in a box? The fact that box takes up space, that you never look in it.
It depends. If you have Christmas stuff and you use it at Christmas, okay, that's fine. You're saving it for a season. If it is something...
If it's a box of like baseball cards
I knew that there was something. There's something specific.
No, okay. I mean, I've got boxes of stuff in my closet that I never look at, but
we can talk about collections. Collections are one area of clutter that people have. Some of them are worth money. Occasionally people have like lots of old coins.
People think they're worth money.
My position on that is that things are only worth money if someone's willing to buy it from you.
Sure.
And if you're willing to sell it, which a lot of times collections are never sold. They're just sitting there depreciating.
Sure.
Most things that we have stored in storage is depreciating physically because paper doesn't last forever unless it's in top-notch, moisture-free, air-free containers. They get dust mites, they fall apart. These things are depreciating. They're depreciating when they're sitting in a storage unit. Typically for me, if it is sitting in a dark space and hasn't been touched or thought about in a year, it probably does not need to be there anymore. If you can't tell me what's in the box, it probably isn't serving you.
Yeah.
And there's a few occasions where that's not the case. When people have moved a lot, like military people, a lot of times they just don't unpack everything until they know they're going to settle down. So sometimes you might have stuff in the box that's still useful. With the baseball cards, I would ask you, why are you keeping it? You keeping it because you collected them as a kid?
Yeah, that's all. I'm not going to sell them. I'm not going to get back into baseball card collecting.
And do you think you're going to give them to your son?
Yeah, of course. Like if he wanted them, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Hey, these could be worth money.
Do you think he's going to want them?
I have no idea. Maybe if he's into baseball, or if baseball card trading gets back, comes back around, which I think it might at some point.
You think?
I think it might. I think card trading is, goes in cycles, and it's probably due to.
What I probably would suggest about that is that you go through them. Let's say you have 500 cards in there. I bet you could dwindle that down to like the best 100 and then give those best 100 that might be worth something someday.
Right.
But there's got to be a bunch in there that are worthless.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
Let them go. Recycle them. Don't let them take up that space anymore. And then you have a collection that makes sense and is maybe organized.
Yeah.
That you can pass on to him, and that might be something that he appreciates. Are you an electronics hoarder?
I have a couple boxes of wires and
Yeah.
receivers and things.
That's pretty common nowadays.
Why is that? Why do I hang on to that stuff?
I would have to ask you that.
Like
Why do you hang
I'm
on
not
to
gonna
it?
set up a music room with
No.
old outdated electronics.
You're not. We'll go through a process, Matt. Matt, what is the function of those cords?
Well, I don't know until I need that cord. But if I need it, I can go to the box and get one.
When's the last time you've pulled a cord
I do
out
go
there?
to the box quite
Yeah?
often.
To get an HDMI cord,
Something like that.
but not an old charger to...
Not
Okay.
like an old iPod.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same. I would go through and pick out the maybe 5 to 10 things that are relevant to electronics now and get rid of all the rest of it. And then you don't have a box of it. You have a tiny box maybe or a drawer that those belong in. It's just about filtering. They don't serve you a purpose anymore.
Right. It's good advice.
It is.
Well, I mean, it's quite a journey from food and restaurateurship to cleaning and organization.
I know.
And we didn't even say the word hoarders. Is that a word that you don't use?
Remember when I talked about having like a consultation period with people? I, to this point, have not taken on any actual clinically diagnosable hoarders. It is a condition. And although my degree's in psychology, I am not a licensed therapist. That really needs to be handled with a professional because it is an attachment to things that is unhealthy and typically not rational.
Mm-hmm.
You can't talk it out. We can't talk about why it's there.
It's more of a mental
It is. It is an illness. However, people use the word hoarding to me all the time. And what I see is not that, but, maybe some shade of it. There are a lot of people that hold on to a lot of things, and it is probably technically hoarding for them, but it's just not an illness. They just haven't been able to either understand their own emotions as to why they're doing it, or they haven't been able to get over it. So sometimes it can be that somebody came from a pretty poor background and having anything really mattered to them growing up. And so as they become adults, letting go of anything is hard. And so, sometimes they can work through that and figure it out. And then as an adult, they can say, oh, I don't need to keep the shoe boxes of every fancy shoe I ever had. But I rarely actually see true hoarding. It's just people holding on to things that it should be easy to let go. They're just not taught that skill. I think that's how I look at it. Yeah. They're not taught the skill of how to let things go when it doesn't serve them anymore. I might take on a hoarding situation at some point. Yeah. I basically say it'll be a case-by-case basis. It's not always so easy. It'd be more so for the family involved in that situation.
Right.
If they're like moving into a home and it's just overwhelming with stuff.
Sure. But, well, you love what you do?
I do love what I do.
I mean, is that did you have this feeling back then when you were in restaurants and stuff? Have you found some sort of like peace with your role in...
Yeah, there were things that I loved. I loved doing, like weddings and catered events, birthday parties, things like that, because they were all full of happy moments. Not all of them, but mostly full of happy moments. And I knew that, we had a lot to do with that. Making things warm and organized and sometimes decorative and feeding them good food. All those things were rewarding and fulfilling. But no, this settles me a little bit better. It feels more in line with being a Buddhist, for one thing, being a bit of a minimalist. I'm not a true minimalist, and so I don't want people to think I'm going to come in and tell them they have to get rid of all their stuff, because I don't think that's true.
So your house isn't just like a bare floor with one lamp and that's it?
It's probably more minimal than most of my friends, but no, I still have things that I love. The only thing I collect are vintage aprons. Okay. But I love them. Because I still love to feed people. I still get to do that, right? So that didn't go away in my life. I just get to do it on a smaller scale. But yeah, this just brings me a little bit more peace. And I feel like every time I go to work, I'm helping people. I'm helping them have a happier day. I get messages from time to time from people that say every time I walk in my closet, I'm happy, which is pretty foreign for most people, that you're not going to have such a great emotion every time you walk into that I would imagine most
people going into their closets, they feel a little anxious and overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed, exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, I love what I do.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations on this, on starting this business. I guess it's
Thank
been a
you.
couple of years now.
Oh, it's new.
It's brand new?
I've only been in this for about 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah, figured out the name and stuff probably a little over a year ago, but
Uh-huh.
single parent, I was busy.
Sure, yeah. I wish you continued success. I hope
Thank
I hope
you.
it takes off. I hope you come to my house and help me get rid of some baseball cards.
Anytime, I'd love to. I think I'm gonna start. I've done one so far, but I think I'm gonna start doing some little like training classes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to do that in the senior arena. I did one with Yelp a couple months ago, and I really enjoyed it. Just giving people kind of a crash course on what they can go home and do. I think I'm gonna try to keep doing that and giving it back a little bit. Not everybody, is ready for or can afford to bring somebody into their home, so I want to give them a little bit of guidance how they can go home and do a little bit on their own.
Well, that's great. You feel good about this? Everything's good?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. All right. Well, that was nice, wasn't it? Talking to her about organization and cleaning and decluttering and letting that burden go by way of throwing out and regifting and recycling the stuff we don't need. I think she's a really interesting person. I like the fact that she's started this business by taking the elements in her life of Buddhism and psychology and applying what she's naturally good at, which is organizing a space and turning it into something that is joyful, filling that space with things that serve a purpose and create happiness. So good for her. I wish her nothing but success with her new, very young business. And I think if you want to get rid of some of the crap that you have in your house and in your life, and you're in the Richmond area, I think you should give her a call or check out her website, send her an email. You can reach her at yourjoyfulspace.com, MJB at yourjoyfulspace.com, Instagram at yourjoyfulspace. Hope everybody has a wonderful, safe, and very merry holiday. We're going to see you back here probably in January, I hope. So we're going to take a couple weeks off, spend it with family, spending it putting together toys and trying to find the right size batteries. Remember, though, I would love to hear from you. Maybe we can talk in January or February, sometime in 2020. If you got something going on that you're starting this new year, let's talk about it on the show. Email me at caughtbyhappy@gmail.com and we'll get you on here. We'll talk about it. We'll figure out why you're doing what you're doing, and maybe you can provide some inspiration to other people who want to follow in your footsteps and get a business going or get a hobby off the ground or put their passions or put their energy into action. caughtbyhappy@gmail.com. Let's do it. All right, everybody. Goodbye. Caught by Happy is a production of Harrington Communications Consultants. If you need help with public relations, content marketing, social media, and yes, even podcast production, you can hit us up at harringtoncc.net.